All right, my English teacher friends, Kristian Kuhn coming at you again, affectionately known as the Bob Ross of composition, with a lesson on solidifying rule number 18 from Strunk and White's seminal text called Write It Right. So this is my ViewMaster edition. Those of you that grew up in the 70s and 80s will, fondly remember the ViewMaster. I have a picture of it there held to my face for those that need context and reference. So in this video, I'm going to run us through a way that I help my students earn the sophistication point on the AP exam, both Lang and Lit. But for you on-level teachers, I nonetheless talk about sophistication with all of my students, regardless of whether or not they're IB or AP students. So I think sophistication is not as hard to teach as some people think it is. I've been called nuts and crazy for suggesting that things like voice, rhythm, and flow can be taught. I think some teachers believe it's an innate disposition that, students either have the alacrity with the language and the facility of it, or they don't. But I am a steadfast believer that these skills can be taught. So what we'll do is take a look at these 12 sentence constructs, and I have literally 180 mentor sentences to teach each of the 12 sentence constructs. So let me start there and talk about the 12 sentence constructs. Strunk and White in rule number 18 suggests that there's 12 different ways to cobble together a single sentence. And why is that important that there's 12 sentence constructs? Well, here's what I have found in my 20 plus years of teaching composition. Your typical struggling emerging writer tends to over-rely on a couple of sentence constructs, and they tend to be the short, simple, declarative and independent clauses. And we know when we read essays, sometimes it feels like we're getting clobbered over the head with this droning rhythm of da-dot, 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 da-dot. And that's because kids are paralleling their sentences with the same sentence construct. That clearly is not sophisticated. So Strunk and White make the assertion that each sentence construct holds a purpose and an intent and an effect. And what I do in my Nuance Academy is teach my students when to bust out certain sentence constructs. And that idea that, you cannot be paralleling your sentences, especially in expository writing, unless you have a purpose, unless you have an effect. And usually that is, especially with my templates, my students tend to use declarative sentences, independent clauses, when they drop their thesis, because you want to be emphatic. And then in the conclusion of the syllogisms, my students tend to use those sentence constructs as well. It's kind of like the lawyer pounding the fist, like pounding the chest of, aha, I've made my point and I'm going to be as emphatic and declarative as possible. So you want sentences to be very concise when you're making those types of pronouncements. So one of my adages is this. I'm always peddling around the question of what if we taught composition like Bob Ross teaches painting? And part of that is positioning ourselves as expert writers in the classroom. While I have supplied 180 mentor sentences for you for these activities, feel free to write your own, because it does take a little while for students to grasp these concepts, especially when you get into the minutia of learning parts of speech. I really think to have a common language is pivotal, especially if you're using alternative grading methods. Even if you're doing traditional grading methods, to have that common language with students is very important. And especially, the way I run my writing workshops, I like it when students can take a look at sentences and, say, hey, Jimmy, your paper is up here on the board and we're looking at it. In your introductory paragraph, you got this declarative thesis template going on, and sentences 1, 2, and 3 are all independent clauses. Why don't you take sentences 2 and 3 and make it a parenthetical statement, combine them? My students can talk at that level, at that sentence level, and man, oh man, is it nice to be able to share that common language. So that's why I really focus a lot on my Nuance Academy, my Word Study Academy, so that we have that common language between us. But it takes a ton of me getting to the proverbial easel and canvas and modeling how to do this with my students over and over and over again until they're independent. So with this exercise, with this ViewMaster exercise, just follow my lead. Monkey see, monkey do. Just follow my mentor sentences, and I'll walk you through how this looks in my classroom, and maybe you can just plug this video in for your students, because I'm going to teach it to teachers the same way that I would teach it to students. So one of the first questions that my students ask me, my National Writing Project students, my teacher participants, is how do you teach voice, rhythm, and flow? This is part of it, you know, the combination, the 1-2 punch of the Word Study Academy and the Nuance Academy. So also in my Nuance Academy, I really focus on how to teach grammar, punctuation, and syntax. You can't get that elusive sophistication unicorn point if you're making errors and little snafus in those areas. So all of that needs to be shored up come exam time. So let's jump right on in and take a look at how I do this with my students. And we'll go right in order. So construct number 1 is the loose sentence. And Strunk and White define a loose sentence as a sentence that does not end with the completion of its main clause, but continues with one or more subordinate clauses or other modifiers. And I know that some teachers and most students would look at that and they would say, what is that? Kristian, you're nuts. Your students know all of that stuff. They do in time. So let's unpack that. Let's unpack that definition, and I'll show you how I get my students to understand these concepts so that we can discuss sentence constructs in an intelligent way. So there's things to know. When you want to use commas and semicolons in sentences, and when you are concerned about whether a sentence is or is not a fragment, a good way to start is to be able to recognize dependent and independent clauses. And this is the game changer, especially for grammar, punctuation, and syntax. Most of my students come to me not knowing what an independent and dependent clause are. They don't even know what a complete sentence is, oddly enough, depending on the teacher they've had the year before. So I'm starting very basic at my school where I teach, and really need to shore up these fundamentals before we get into the sentence constructs. I'm assuming some of you, this is, you're good in the hood with this and you can skip this. So in terms of a loose sentence, you need to know what an independent clause is. And here's how Strunk and White define it. An independent clause is a group of words that contains a subject and verb and expresses a complete thought. An independent clause is a sentence. And then I have a model sentence there. Todd studied in the ice cream parlor for his chemistry test. But here's the thing. Students don't know what a subject and a verb are. So you really got to go basic, at least at my school. I'm speaking for my students, especially some of my on-level classes. The younger they are, the more likely it is they don't know this stuff. So it takes a lot of this ViewMaster exercise, identifying subject, verbs, independent and dependent clauses. So let's take a look at dependent clauses. A dependent clause is a group of words that contains a subject and verb but does not express a complete thought. A dependent clause cannot be a sentence. Often a dependent clause is marked by a dependent marker word. Example, when Ted studied in the ice cream parlor for his chemistry quiz, what happened when he studied? The thought is incomplete. So that's a dependent clause. You got to slap a comma there and finish the thought. All right, so we got subject, verb, independent, dependent clause. Let's play with these ideas a bit and get into the sentence constructs themselves, and I'll show you how I run the ViewMaster with my students. So it's this simple. I give my students some mentor sentences. I take the one from Strunk and White's Write It Right, and then I have my own. So in terms of the ViewMaster, we're going to take a look at 4 sample loose sentences, and then I'll show you exactly what we do with this. So Strunk and White says, Mr. White carefully planned the stages of this essay, and then he wrote it. And mine are, the sunflowers were fully grown by the end of August, although it had taken a while. The mouse had gotten away again, but not for long. Babe Ruth confidently stepped up to the plate, and then he crushed the grand slam. So what I do is I talk my students through this. Independent, dependent, subject, verb. Why is it loose? And then what I do is I have my students pause and ask all the questions that they possibly can. And to really shore up and solidify the concept of how to write a loose sentence, I have them write 5 loose sentences of their own. And then typically what I have them do is just submit them to me as a Google Doc. And I take a whole bunch and I plaster them all over my overhead projector. And we take them down and we just dissect them, make sure students are doing it right. And really to hammer home the concept. And I'm a firm believer of this. The more writing students see, the better they become, and the more that the concepts that Velcro themselves to their brain. So let's skip to number 2, independent clause. So Strunk and White's example is, Mr. White wrote the essay after carefully planning it. So they show 12 different ways to write that sentence, which is pretty cool. I enjoy sitting by the fireplace and reading. Waiting to have my car's oil changed is boring. It is good to tackle the hardest chores first. So this is what we do. Again, just break down subject, verb, why it's independent, what's the chemistry of that sentence, and we stop and write 5 independent clauses. So I teach on the block, and typically what I do is do 2 sentence constructs a day over 6 blocks. And I know some of you have traditional bell schedules and you can figure out your pacing on your own, but I find 2 a day is more than enough for my students to handle. The next one is the adverb clause. And the definition is, an adverb clause is a dependent clause that describes a verb, an adjective, or an adverb. An adverb clause tells when, where, how, why, to what extent, or under what conditions something happened. Let's put that into simpler terms, right? Again, your students are going to need to know the parts of speech. And when I ask my students in the beginning of the year, can anyone define what an adverb is? Usually there's only like 1 or 2 hands that go up. And they even have trouble identifying pronouns oftentimes. So all of this needs to be taught. So on this slide here, I have the breakdown of adverb clauses in terms of time, reason, condition, contrast, and some of the trigger words that indicate whether or not you have an adverb clause. Also have place included in there. So what we do is mentor sentence, and we have Strunk and White's. Before he wrote the essay, Mr. White carefully planned it. Until it stops thundering and lightning, we can't golf. When your father gets home from work, we will have dinner. We will not have school today because there was a blizzard last night. And you're getting the gist here. Write 5 adverb clauses, right? And we just go through it. And the next one is adverb, all right? A word or phrase that modifies or qualifies an adjective, verb, or other adverb, or a group expressing a relation of place, time, circumstance, manner, cause, degree, etc. So examples, gently, quite, then, there. And then we have the mentor sentences, always leading with Strunk and White's. Carefully, Mr. White planned the stages of his essay. Cautiously, he unlocked the kennel and waited for the puppies to come and play. Solemnly, the policeman approached the mayor and placed him under arrest. Suddenly, he slammed the door shut and hid in the closet. So students can quickly get this just by looking at the mentor sentences. You as expert teacher just break down the language of it, break down the parts of speech. Maybe you want to write a couple of mentor sentences yourself. In my packet, I have hundreds of them. So if you're feeling uninventive or just want life to be easy, just take my sentences. So at the end of the adverb, you guessed it, try your hand at writing the sentence construct 5 times. And again, I find that to be the magic Velcro. Having students do something 5 times independently on their own and then review it whole class. Just plug a few, you can write them on the whiteboards, put them on the easel, put them on the overhead. The more they see, the more it's going to anchor itself to their comprehension. The next one is the infinitive. So sentence construct 5. Any verb that is preceded by the word to is an infinitive. Here are some examples. To love, to eat, to run, to believe, to foul, to laugh, to stare, to wonder. An example, to write a good essay, Mr. White needed to plan carefully. And then here I have my mentor sentences for the infinitive. We want to buy an electric car. He bought flowers to apologize to his girlfriend. I'm bringing some candy to eat on the plane. Brad is going to ride his bike to school. So it's all contingent upon that too. So you guessed it. Let's write 5 sentences properly incorporating the infinitive. And that takes care of sentence construct number 5. The next one is present participle phrase. And this is participles that end in ing are present participle phrases. These phrases describe a condition that is happening at the same time as the action in the sentence, no matter what tense the rest of the sentence is in. So here's an example. Sitting in the rocking chair, the old woman yelled at the kids in her yard. And as always, I got mentor sentences for the 6th sentence construct. The running dog crashed into the wall. The crying baby kept her parents up all night. Jack watched the sleeping giant as he crept by. The aching tooth was rotten, so it needed to be pulled. And as always, try your hand at 5, right? Write 5 present participle phrases. And again, my recommendation is not to do this exercise in one fell sweeping swoop, but to break it up over some classes and just revisit until it becomes theirs and they possess it. So a past participle phrase is a past participle phrase includes participles in the past tense. This includes verbs that end in ed as well as irregular verbs in the past tense. They describe conditions that happen before the action in the sentence. And you got the endings right there, ed, dt, en, or n. And we have some examples here. He bought teeth whitening cream for his coffee-stained teeth. Worried about the approaching deadline, Mr. White began to plan his essay. I've forgotten the lines of my monologue. My gold coins have been buried. The whispered words were soothing to hear. So every time you show the mentor, write 5. Do it all on your lonesome. So we do this for all 12. I'll run through them for you. The next is the gerund phrase. A gerund phrase is created when a gerund, a verb that takes an ing form and functions as a noun, has a modifier, object, or both. That sounds quite technical, so let's break it down for a simple explanation of a gerund phrase. So these examples really break it down. So just go over them, explain them to your kids. Again, mentor a few, and then try your hand at 5. Just simple. Skill and drill. This is a very simple exercise, but it's a great way to teach that voice rhythm and flow. Prepositional phrases come next. And preposition is a word governing a noun or pronoun. A preposition can be used with a noun, pronoun, infinitive, or gerund. Prepositions are pretty versatile. They can indicate time, location, spatial relationships, direction, and other abstract relationships. And then on this slide here, I have a list of common prepositional phrases just to give students a sense of what they are. But this is going to take a little bit more explanation because you have adverb prepositional phrases like you have here. The bird chirped with excitement. Chirped how? To find your car keys, look in the last 3 rooms you were in. Look where, right? So go slow, give examples, really use some mentor sentences, be the expert teacher, and explain this to your kids, and then get into the purpose. Like, why would they write these sentences? When do we see these sentences in writing? When do professional writers use these sentences? So then you have the adjective prepositional phrase. The breadstick with the most salt is the best. I want to eat at the restaurant in the mall. All right. So prepositional phrases behaving as nouns. So you're getting into some nitty gritty sentence level stuff. After the concert will be too late for us to go to dinner. During intermission is the best time to get a snack. And have your students practice those 3, right? Try 5 of each. Again, this is the area, prepositional phrases, I think, is the hardest one for students to master. And it's a very versatile sentence, and definitely can be used over and over again in expository writing. So worthy to learn and worthy to teach. The next one is the demonstrative adjective. And a demonstrative adjective are used in order to describe or specify an object. So this, that, those, these. And you have the examples there. Those tomatoes are rotting. I think I want to buy that blue car. This puppy is cute. These shoes are too tight. So that one's pretty easy. And again, just pause and have your students do 5 of those. And then you skip to the adjective clause. But the adjective clauses are dependent clauses that give information about nouns. They allow you to combine 2 sentences into one by using relative pronouns, who, whom, whose, where, when, which, that, and why as connectors. And as always, we have ourselves some examples right there. Bread, which most people love, is not very healthy. Those people whose names are on the list will go to their first choice college. And Grandpa remembers the old days when there were no cell phones. Fruit that is grown organically is healthy. Students who work hard get good grades. And then with that adjective clause, you guessed it, try it 5 times. And again, ultimately what you're going to see as you do these exercises is it transfers over into the writing to break that droning rhythm of just stacking independent clause upon independent clause, short, simple, declarative sentence. Moving forward, absolute phrases. Absolute phrases don't attach themselves to a sentence with a conjunction. All that's needed is a comma. His head full of ideas, Mr. White carefully planned each stage of the essay. And conjunctions is something that needs to be taught. I know in AP Lang, for example, even in AP Lit, you know, when students are doing their syntactical analysis, it's really important to analyze conjunctions. And that's something typically my students don't come to me with knowledge of. And they don't know how to identify it as a purposeful effect in writing, but they also don't know how to wield it in their own writing. So I have a few absolute phrases here. Weather permitting, we shall meet in the evening. God willing, we shall meet again. The weather being fine, we went out for a picnic. The sun having risen, we set out on our journey. It being a stormy day, we stayed inside the house. So that's the absolute phrase. And that, my friends, takes us to the end of the ViewMaster. So you can see tons of mentor sentences. And in the descriptor to this video and the YouTube channel, you can click that link and get an answer booklet that I have created for Spingo, which is a gamification edutainment game to really solidify the ViewMaster. It's like a bingo game. It's in the YouTube channel, and the answer booklet is attached to this particular link here down below. And you got, I think, 180 mentor sentences there showing all 12 sentence constructs so that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. So if you want these slides, you likewise can download them by clicking that link. And know that I'm a lead teacher for the National Writing Project, and we offer professional development throughout the entire calendar year. So if you want more information on our PD offerings, you can go to teachinghowtowrite.com. That's my personal website, and click on my NWP courses. That website also has a bunch of free goodies on there that you can take and cherry pick what you want. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, give me an email at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. So for now, happy writing, happy teaching, and happy 12-sentence constructing.